insights on the automotive scene in India. Then I will move towards the second part, which is the automotive insights, where I would cover uh, some insights on the vehicle development process. Because what we see are the cars on the road, but what goes in the background and how early. This is what I will share with you. Um, this will follow with me taking a tour around how does a automotive company looks like in a country or as an entity, and within the automotive company what all functions are there, their activities, and then I would focus on the factory environment, like what goes in, what comes out as a car, what all things happen inside the plant. And I'll be certainly touching based on the automation and digitalization part as I move on. Then we will move towards the digitalization part in the automotive industry. And the last one will be a discussion on the career opportunities in automotive as per the norms which we normally have in the country. So, starting off with the history of the global automotive, this is I try to differentiate in three centuries. Starting from 19th century, we had the first steam-powered automotive uh, getting manufactured, right? And then we had a gasoline technology coming in. Also, we had a first production vehicle, which was which was built in the 19th century. Um, the 20th century had Ford and General Motors coming into the scene, where they started mass production of their vehicles. And then later on, the big three in the three different continents, like GM, Ford, and Chrysler in the US, Austin, Morris, sorry, one moment. Yeah, Austin, Morris, and Singer in Britain, and Peugeot, Renault, and Citroën in France. So these were the big three in these three different locations that got into being. Now, then, in the 20th century, we had the digitization happening on the vehicles. The first sports car with ECU, which is engine control unit, and PGMPFI, which is a programmable fuel injection system. This was built in 1954 by Mercedes, and then this was adopted by many players for the high-end vehicles in the early 80s, as we talk about. And then in the 90s, the globalization happened, the economy got opened up, and different players started in exploring markets outside their own countries or their regions. So that is how it went about. The 21st century made us sensitive about the emission norms, which fast forwarded the computerized engine management system. Tesla came into the picture and try and change the entire paradigm. In 2007, 2008, if some of you would remember, there was a very big recession in the automotive industry, wherein the big player, the world's number one player, General Motors, it went into bankruptcy. Chrysler was also into the verge of bankruptcy. Now both these conglomerates were saved. GM was saved by the government of US by holding hand, giving them assistance. So, and Chrysler entered into a joint ventureship with Fiat. So that's how the revival happened, and then slowly the revival happened in the automotive industry, and then it has really taken off from there on. China overtook US. I have a video we talk about how the China has progressed, but China really took the industry by storm in 2009, and it continues to do so till date. Of course, not to forget Tesla and Google. They redefined the automotive industry norms, because they took the industry towards autonomous vehicles, driverless vehicle technology, and this is where the maximum utilization of digitalization is happening and is going to happen. So that's where the industry is going right now. And of course, if I talk about GM and other players, they are also trying to follow the suit, entering into JV with these companies and having some technical technical sharing system. But Tesla and Google, these are the ones which are leading the pack as on today. Talking about India, India was very late. It was an importer in early 90s, and then everybody knows we had Fiat an ambassador. Maruti Suzuki, it came into the industry in 1983, which redefined the entire automotive, the scenario, because the customers' perceptions about their expectations changed with the passenger cars. Maruti redefined it. It actually took a quantum jump in terms of technology at that time. And then in 1991, Manmohan Singh opened up the economy for the country, and then we had major players like Toyota, Honda, General Motors, Hyundai, Ford coming into the country, and then our country getting flooded with the different models, and then customer having more choices. Tata Motors, our homegrown company, also started building vehicles in 1998. The first vehicle being Indica. Uh, as you know, 2017 MG has already entered. Kia is already there. PSA is just waiting to launch their first car. And then, as we talk, we have Great Wall Motors, which is on the verge of taking over General Motors plant in India. And then we have Changwon and other companies which are waiting to get into the country scene. However, because of the political situation, the timings appear to be getting deferred. I do not know whether it happens in 2021. Definitely, the product launch would till end of 2021, maybe 2022. So that's about the industry scene in India. Now, this slide will just touch base about what happened for the first time in the global auto industry. We had first gasoline automobile in 1879, disc brakes in 1902, first car in 1908 by Henry Ford. Electric starter was introduced, which was again a quantum jump in 1911. Assembly line mass production in 1913. Um, and then we had first air conditioning in 1939 and cruise control coming in 1950. Of course, these all technologies have been undergoing a lot of refinements over the year, but when they were launched for the first time, definitely holds a significance in the books. So 1966 is where the fuel injection system was introduced electronic. This is basically migration from the carburetor based technology to fuel injection systems, where we have this is where the start of electronics happened in the automotive ignition system. And then airbags were introduced in 1970, which is related to the passenger vehicle safety. Anti-lock braking system, ABS that we call, it happened in 1995. And then we had entry by Google for self-driving project. This is at the project stage, not mass production level till date, 2009. And then Tesla actually launched their first car, Model S, in 2016. So that's how the progression of different milestones which were achieved in the automotive industry. Now, this will give you a trend about how the industry has been growing over the years. Japan was the leader. Now, US becomes number one in 1995. There is no China, no India in the picture as such, no Brazil. Pretty steady at this time. And suddenly we see China entering into the scene and continuously rising up. And we see Mexico emerging in the scene. We see China climbing the ladder. You can see a steady rise by China. It comes to number 4 position. Brazil enters into the scene. China becomes number three in 2008, and 2009 China overtakes US. And here comes India in 2008 onwards. So this talks about how the growth of US happened initially in 1995, then China in 2009, uh, from 2005 to 2009 exactly, and then India getting into the scene, India and Brazil, and then China taking over from US as number one player, which it continues to go till date. So the industry has actually grown continuously, with an aberration of 2019 where we had a negative growth in the country as well as in many other markets. So that's how that talks about the progression of automotive. This slide is basically a slide on the vehicle development process. Normally, for any car to be developed, it takes about 4.5 years. Earlier, it used to take 5 years. Now, the best time achieved was around 4.4 years, 1 quarter. And this is an indicative slide of General Motors. What normally happens is that when we say architecture is a product line, which is normally we call it as a platform. So the architecture development happens earlier on, which is at say 225 weeks before the launch of the vehicle, and then this is about 6-7 months duration, which now finalizes which architecture should be taken forward. Then the digital models are created. Based on the digital models, clay models are created, which is about one-third of the size of the vehicle. This activity happens in automotive design studios, which probably are very, very rare. Like in GM, I would talk, say, it has about, say, 2 or 3 design studios that I remember. I mean, this is really very, very confidential, very high-end, high technology, activities. They happens here in terms of vehicle design. So one third clay models are iterations are checked, and based on the one which is finalized, full size clay model is made, which is basically shown to the target audience. So if I say here clinic happens, clinic is nothing but showing the vehicle to the target audience, different strata, and based on the feedbacks that are received, a single theme is finalized. So once this single theme is finalized, that is where the development team gets into the work. This basically ends say at about minus 145 weeks, and then a vehicle program initiation happens, and then the development of parts and components, it starts happening. And then we have basically the at minus 80 weeks, we have first vehicle made, and this vehicle is basically looked at and multiplied. And based on this vehicle, the data release takes place from manufacturing perspective, and then the manufacturing cycle starts from minus 30 weeks, where on the plant the first vehicle is made, and from minus 30 to 0, basically the first vehicle to mass production vehicle, it takes about 30 to 35 weeks depending upon the classification, and the vehicle is launched. While all this is happening, what engineering does, engineering gets the initial vehicles, and then they are into different kind of validations, because for a vehicle to be launched, the vehicle has to be approved from the certification agencies like ARAI we have in the country, we have ICAT. So two type of validations happen. One is component level, second is vehicle level. and based on that approval only, any car manufacturer gets approval to sell the car in the country. So that summarizes the vehicle development process. Um, Next, different kind of powertrains that we have. Powertrain is basically engine and transmission. We all know about gasoline and diesel. Now, the difference between the gasoline and diesel is basically, of course, we have engine in a conventional vehicle. We have a motor in place of that in EV, and the transmission is same. Since electric vehicles don't use any fuel, so in place of fuel tank, we have a battery pack, and then in place of the power control, sorry, in place of engine control unit, we have a power control unit in case of an electric vehicle. And definitely, since it is an electric vehicle, there has to be a charging facility inside the car. So this is what is the difference between a conventional vehicle as well as versus an electric vehicle. If you have any questions so far, fine. Otherwise, I'll take the questions at the end of the presentation. Okay, now let's talk about the digitization in automotive. See, digitization in automotive has been happening for a long time. Basically, a lot of simulations, a lot of softwares are used in designing of the vehicle. If we talk about, we have for a conventional vehicle, we have the thermal analysis done, and then we have manufacturing analysis done. We simulate the processes of manufacturing, and then we also basically, sorry, I this one. We have NVH. NVH is basically noise, vibration, and harshness. So the vehicle in a dynamic condition, how it will react to a different kind of vibrations while driving, what kind of outside noises will come inside, what kind of harshness would be felt inside. So these are all evaluated and optimized depending upon the vehicle requirement. Vehicle dynamics talks about how would the driver feel when he would be driving this car. So this all are done on virtual perspective, digitally, and the accuracy level is fairly reasonable. Definitely, it cannot replace the actual experience completely, but then it has simplified the design to actual condition to a great extent. On the right side, we have the material and the durability analytics, which talks about how would the vehicle be behaving during different kind of crash conditions or different kind of rough road conditions. Based on that, the modifications in the design they do happen. As you know, as part of the approval process, the durability is one key criteria which the certification agencies they consider. In fact, we have NCAP rating. Now we have one of the products like EZS, which has a 5-star rating, which is highest of its kind. So it's very important to get a certification in terms of safety norms, which has become a legal requirement by the agencies, all of late. So these things happen digitally. The design activities over and above this related to electric vehicles are basically done on the battery thermal analysis because it's very important. The batteries are very sensitive, and battery structural safety is very important because in electric vehicles, unlike our thought process, the batteries would always be on the base of the car and will be always exposed to the rough road conditions, contours, some things hitting to the battery. So it's very important to have the battery structure very, very safe. Of course, electric vehicles, they have their own NVH. As you know, electric vehicles do not make any sound while they are moving. So that is still we have different kind of pass by noises and all those kind of criterias which are taken care while designing a electric vehicle. Okay, now talking about the automotive company as such. What happens is for any company, we have on the left side pre-manufacturing phase in which the engineering department controls all the specifications for the vehicle which has to be manufactured. Purchase departments does purchasing of the components which will go into the vehicle. Manufacturing engineering, which is my department, makes sure that the facility and the production lines are ready, which meet the manufacturability requirements as well as the capacity requirements of the company. And then also we have supplier quality function, which takes care of the quality part of the incoming parts. Definitely not to forget supply chain, which ensures that the material is the end-to-end supply chain is properly managed in terms of material availability. Then we have manufacturing department, which does the manufacturing of the product, vehicles, and then we have quality department. These are two key departments inside the plant related, which directly interface with the vehicle. Then we have human resources and IT department as a supporting department and supporting manufacturing function. Once manufacturing is done, vehicles are sent out to the customer, which is handled by marketing and sales department. And once the vehicles are owned by the customer, then after sales department takes care of the after sales warranty part and customer issues, and also gives feedback to the plant to and quality and engineering to improve based on the concerns that come with the vehicle. So that talks about the automotive enterprise in any country. On the right side, we have over here factory environment. The first the first department is called stamping shop. Stamping shop is nothing but pressing the sheet metal parts into different shapes, which eventually gets welded with each other and form the shell of the complete vehicle body. And then we have the weld shop, which actually welds all these parts together. The kind of weldings which we use is resistance welding, which is spot welding, and MIG welding. And then once the body shell is completed, then the vehicle is sent into the paint shop, which uses different kind of, I mean, not different kinds. It crosses through different layers of painting. The first coat is electrolytic deposition. It has a thickness level of about 20 microns onto the vehicle body, and then we have two more layers like the primer and the base coat, which goes into the vehicle. Primer is a common primer, and the base coat defines the color of the vehicle. Once the base coat is done, then we have the clear coat applied onto the vehicle surface, which gives the glossy look onto the vehicle. So once the painted body is made, then it enters into the assembly shop. Assembly shop is where it goes inside as a body and it comes out as a vehicle on its own wheels, and all the assemblies related to like engine and all other parts assembled into the vehicle and in start condition. And then it is delivered out to the final inspection, and once final inspection is done, it is sent out to the dealership for the customers. So that's the process which is conventionally is followed across all manufacturers alike. Uh, if we talk about the vehicle flashing programming, what happens is all these vehicles are now, as I said, they're all electronically controlled. So what happens is the sales office gets a work order about one particular vehicle, that yes, we want to have these vehicles of these variant types, and then it is the information is entered into the global network, which comes to the plant server. And then from this plant server, in the end of the line, these software files, we call them as calibration files. They are basically fed inside through a diagnostic tool that we use, which connects the vehicle with this tool, and then through a Wi-Fi, all the calibration softwares that get inside the vehicle, and then the vehicle gets started. If this activity doesn't happen, the vehicle will not even know what its entity is. So it is very, very important. All the this technology is used by all the companies these days. Now, if we talk about smart manufacturing, what happens is that once the vehicle gets into the production line, the variant and the type of vehicle, that data gets entered into the system, and then based on different stages, the part consumption gets recorded. And from supply chain perspective, once the vehicle is out, the vehicle quantity gets reduced from the inventory level, and based on that, the reordering process that happens automatically with the supply chain down the line. And once the vehicle is out of the plant, then the vehicle related information, it goes out to the after sales and marketing, and the traceability data that is retained for that particular vehicle, so that in case of any issues or concerns which customer has in future while the vehicle is on road, the traceability of the vehicle can happen, and then the diagnostic can happen very, very quickly. So that is the process, which is end to end, takes care on a digital platform with the vehicle and the customer and the users. Uh, in MG Motor, when I installed this MG plant, I had option of going to the conventional way, reducing costs, versus putting some smart features. So I decided and I proposed to go for a smart manufacturing. So our MG Motor right now looks like this, where all the machine equipments on the floor which are used in building the vehicle are, they talk to each other, they are all PLC programmed, they are all PLC controlled, they are interlocked with each other. We have a MES system, the data goes into the MES system, and um, we in case of any concerns related to any breakdowns, it's very, very easy to diagnose and resolve the issue. So the uptime that we normally are running currently is more than 99%. We just have less than 1% of line stoppages because of equipment. That's primarily because of smart manufacturing and digitalization of our equipment. uh, of course, the real-time status we do get because of all this, and we get the reports very, very on time, very efficient reports that we get. We basically we of course, because of this, uh, we can diagnose to life, and machine check sheets are coming out giving the machine status, and we get a lot of data is coming out of the equipment. And also, in case of any diagnostics, like in case of any breakdowns, we definitely get the failure modes, and it helps us in doing the root cause analysis. Communication perspective, all this data we do get on our laptops as well as on our smartphones currently. So that is a basic way of manufacturing that we follow in MG plant here. Now, this we will talk about the autonomous vehicles. If we talk about autonomous vehicles, we have level one autonomous vehicle Gloucester, which we recently launched. This is this is called as level one. Level one is basically human driver is assistance is required for all critical functions, but it does have intelligent features. Now, the intelligent features that we have here is adaptive cruise control. Uh, for your knowledge, adaptive cruise control is okay, let me talk about cruise control first. Cruise control is once you actuate cruise control, the vehicle will move on the road in a steady speed. Adaptive cruise control is that in case you're driving at a speed of 80 and any other vehicle in front of you is driving at a speed of 60, then this our vehicle will reduce its speed automatically without any driver involvement to a speed of 60. So it will adapt to the speed relative to the other vehicles. Okay, I think I would adaptive cruise control, automatic braking. We will understand through the video in this slide. But TPMS is again a digital way of having the tire pressure sensors inside the tires and getting the information of the tire pressure onto the dashboard, the cluster we call it. And then a lane departure warning again is a warning if you change the lane. This is basically done through a radar or a camera, and then Also, steering angle sensors also give a feedback. If I'm turning the steering angle, it will also give an alarm that you are departing from your lane. So that's about the Gloucester features. Talking about the levels of autonomous vehicles. Uh, right now, we are normally vehicles that are there in the market, global market, are of level 2, wherein at least two simultaneous tasks are done, like controlling steering or speed, but driver still is in control. Conditional automation is where the car becomes co-pilot, but again, vehicle manages most critical functions, like in case of something coming in front suddenly and things like that. But then still, human driver is expected to manage the vehicle of automation. Level 4 is high automation level, where all safety features, safety critical driving functions are done automatically and done through while monitoring vehicles environments. Uh, and the full automation is level 5. It's a true driverless car where may not be having a steering wheel at all, and it will just look like a place to sit with no controls for the driver. uh, so let's see about the ADAS features. So it brakes automatically. It recognizes traffic signal. Forward collision warning. Slows down. Lane departure warning. Blind spot detection. Somebody which is coming which is not visible. Slows down. Based on the lighting illumination outside, the beam would automatically adjust itself. That's about ADAS feature, which is or advanced drive assist system. So our Gloucester vehicle has all these features in built. Uh, Now talking about the connected car, this is our Gloucester car vehicle is a connected vehicle in which a lot of digitalization work, activity is done. Basically, what we have the telecom service provider. This is tower which interacts with our vehicle. This is a T box that we have, and then this also through this we connect with the GPS. and also with the plant. Now we have SIM card inserted into this, uh, which is the programming of this SIM is done by the company itself. So now this SIM is basically provides the internet facility to the vehicle as such, and also arranges for having access to the websites that we have, as and the apps on this, and all this can be controlled through a mobile. I'll just run through this so you get to know about. Sorry.
Hi guys, I'm Avira, and together we explore the future of mobility. Today, our smartphones and TVs and homes are already connected to the internet. So why not our cars, right? To fill that void in the present, MG Motors has already put the internet inside of its cars. With their inbuilt 5G ready SIM card, MG cars make your drive enjoyable with live streaming of music on the go from the inbuilt Ghana Music app. Navigate your way through the heaviest of traffic with live lock, unlock the car, get intrusion warnings, and even switch on the aircon to cool the cabin before you start your drive on a hot afternoon. Living with a car just got a whole lot easier thanks to the internet inside. See you next time, hopefully in a connected car. Ciao!
So that's about the connected car features, and these are the features that we have. We have geofencing, wherein we can define the vehicle once it enters a particular area or it exits that. We get to know. We The voice command that we give to the vehicle. E-call is related to the emergency services. Even if we do not call in case of any collision, even if our system network is not working, we can still connect to automatically emergency services. The vehicle status is there available anytime on our mobile about the status of the vehicle, and we can control the vehicle as specified it, through this video, that we can remotely start the vehicle and start the aircon, so that when we get to the vehicle it's already cold. And different alarms linked with this: engine start alarm, remote open close of the windows, overspeed warning, and we have an iSmart app on the Apple Watch, and we can immobilize this vehicle in for from theft perspective. And I already talked about the tire pressures, which already the TPMS is what we call it. It is there in this. So these are the feature, we call them as iSmart, which we have in our Hector, and all our products like EZS Hector and Gloucester. So, if I talk about the industry 4.0, things like that. So, the evolution of the industry, automotive, is transition through mechanization, then mass production, as we saw. Right now, we say industry 4.0. I would say it is in transition between industry 3 and 4, wherein definitely we have automation, but the communication with the environment, we are still not there completely. So we are still in transition to industry 4.0. Uh, and I feel that we have been talking about 4.0 for a long time, but no, the growth has sort of slowed over last few years. But nevertheless, the advancement is happening. But the ultimate goal is to go to autonomy, which is basically uh, even the human element in terms of taking decisions on the environment might be, reduced to great extent. In the sense, if I have a problem, if I have a diagnostic report, then I need not make a decision. The decision is taken automatically by the system. So that's what autonomy is all about. um, Industry 4.0, if we talk about, is all about connectedness, and where all the devices connect to each other and to human, and they provide real-time data is what we is it is all about. And this is all done. This is facilitated through different sensors that we deploy at different critical locations, positions to get the information and then sharing the data. And then with if we connect it with advanced analytics and machine learnings, then this ecosystem of sensors that we talk about, it becomes very powerful. As I told that we are already uh, pretty much over there in terms of NG plant as such. We use all this to a great benefit. Our it gives us good results, and I think this is being taken up by almost all the companies, but then it comes with a cost, and that's what it is. It doesn't come cheap, but then I think it is need of the hour because of the incurring costs which are going up. So if we have more automation, more connectivity, then we reduce the overall non-value-added activities, non-value-added waste, and we optimize on the money that we spend. Based on the automotive world, the sensors in the supply chain have been instrumental for all this. Bosch had a 25% increase in output for it, automatic ABS system and ESC program, which is electronic stability. And just this was done by when they introduced smart connected lines. So this is the great benefits of having connected system in place. Um, Now let's talk about the digitization in automotive. If we talk about in the sourcing, right now what we normally do is we have large displays, giant screens, where we are able to showcase the buying informations which are ready reckoner for any customer to understand the features and benefits of or the variant details of the products for sale. And then we also have this virtual reality wherein a customer can virtually try to open the door and sneak inside what's inside the vehicle cabin. And even some authentic sound effects of door opening, closing, and things like that are there. They are able to be simulated once during this activity. So this is already in implementation right now. And also based on the consumer expectations to buy online, we are now trying to migrate in opening up that another platform wherein we can sell the cars directly through our websites. We do not need to have a dealership kind of a system, because if we are able to sell the cars directly, then it saves a lot of cost to us. So eventually we are going to benefit out of this. A connected supply chain, as I touched base earlier, is basically we use advanced algorithm and artificial intelligence in like creating schedules and managing the processes, and then having a very close working with the humans and robots working together on the assembly line, which is basically leveraging the automation with the human actions. And then by doing this we optimize on the productivity and we decrease defect rates. Now if I spend investing on robots completely, then I spend more cost. So that's where the economy of sales comes into picture, where automation has to be justified. But then that's this these are all logical decisions that we have to take when we design different platforms. Talking about the predictive maintenance is supporting the customer in terms of self-diagnostic systems wherein drivers are alerted in case of any problem or any observations or any um, malfunction in the vehicle system, and then giving a feedback wherein the driver can proactively go and get the vehicle serviced. For example, like TPMS we talked about, in case of any engine oil is less, or any connection in the electrical system is loose, then it gives an alarm and also tells us what is the problem, so it can be repaired very very efficiently. So it reduces mechanical failures and recalls. And then this data maintains a connection between the OEMs and the customer. Even if the customer sells the vehicle, still the data would always be there in the system. These all are prevalent right now. It's nothing which is ongoing, which is going to come. It's already there in the industry. And then autonomous vehicles we talked about. This is something which is going to come and which is going to redefine. But what's happening is that there is a big problem over here, in the sense that the data security and protection, which is a very very big um, enabler, which needs to be taken care, because in case you leave the controls of your vehicle to artificial intelligence and autonomy, and if somebody hacks your vehicle controls, um, you might even have a crash and you wouldn't even know about it because you didn't even trigger it. Somebody messed up. It's like hacking a system. So this continues to be a challenge. Unless and until that is taken care of, I do not foresee autonomous level 5 vehicles flying on the road anytime soon. Uh, and then the new trends which have come up is on the shared mobility. As we know, like we have Uber and Lyft and other ride sharing services, wherein we use a digital platform in using the services of vehicle without worrying about buying and maintaining a vehicle on our own. So this is again a future trend, which is again a trend, and I think it is going to be very much in use. Now, but the future on e-mobility is also going to be optimizing on the public transport. Like if we have autonomous, this will come with autonomous vehicles, that in case we have an autonomous vehicle, it might pick up more than one person together going to a same location, or dropping and picking up some person to their command. So the cab services with autonomous vehicles are again going to have a paradigm shift in terms of mobility in future. uh, Coming to the career options, this is the last slide. Now, in automotive, as I talk about, the biggest target function is the marketing, which is when I say marketing, it is above the line and below the line. Um, Above the line, as such, there's a physical marketing we see on television or hoardings or face to face. Below the line is all about the digital marketing. In fact, MG has been very successful in using below the line marketing, wherein we started off our campaign as early as 2017, although we launched the vehicle in May 2018. So almost about a year ago, we started, targeting through digital marketing. We had YouTube, we had on the internet. If you open up any Google app, the first ad will come up of MG. And actually, when we launched the actual vehicle, we did not spend much on above the line marketing, expenditure. In fact, MG in the marketing circle of automotive is a case study, which is studied by our competitors on how well we could manage by below the line marketing campaigns, and successfully launched a vehicle and achieved our sales targets. So this is one area where we have a scope of having management trainings. In sales, definitely direct sales, dealer development, fleet and retail sales. These are some segments where we have opportunities. We do have opportunities for management trainees. After sales, when I say after sales, has two components. One is field. Field is that after sales portion which deals with the customers directly. Technical after sales is one vertical in which the concerns, the troubles which the customers which they face in their vehicles, they are taken up with the engineering function, quality function, manufacturing functions in continually improving whatever is required to improve, so that the vehicle has virtually no minimum or no defects, no issues or troubles to the customer as such. So that's the second vertical of after sales. Then we have the public relations and corporate communications, which deals with the press releases, licensing with media and things like that. Then we have spare parts management systems, spare parts management function, which takes care, of the spare parts, whether it is imported spare parts or local spare parts. Uh, it also takes care of some of the accessories which goes with which goes into the vehicle, but not installed in the plant. These are the accessories which are directly fitted on the dealership based on the customer requirement. And the last one is the customer care department, which takes care of the customer concerns. So these are some of the fields in our customer experience management (CM) department. Um, Next, I would talk about the program management. Program management is nothing but managing the product lines, and if as I say, is different vehicle platforms in which they do advanced planning. Like, for example, if I have launched Hector already, now I have to Hector's product life cycle say is 5 years or 7 years, depending upon the projections. Then I need to plan for the vehicle which is going to replace either Hector on the same platform or on a different platform. So we have different managers of different platforms, which take care of the planning of the different vehicles coming into the country. So this is again where there are some opportunities over there. Really something related to the uh, working on towards the commercial side of it, in terms of working closely with the engineering, purchasing, and manufacturing function. Again, it's a coordination job which deals with advanced vehicle development as well as the future development. And then we have new project management, which is basically managing the vehicle launches directly in the country. This is basically when the project is approved, when we know that yes, this vehicle is going to come, so we assign some people on managing those projects. So these are some of the opportunities on the program management level. Then talking about the supply chain, we have direct purchase, indirect purchase. I hope you understand the difference between direct and indirect. Direct purchase is basically the material which goes inside the vehicle. Indirect purchase is for the material which is required as an accessory or as a subsidiary to process the vehicle in the manufacturing process. So we have these two verticals. Then we have the scheduling. Scheduling is on to the incoming material side. And then we have production planning, which is relating to the manufacturing and then to the sales and distribution side of it. So that basically scheduling and productions planning covers the entire supply chain from planning perspective. Then we have EXIM. EXIM is basically exports and imports. This is basically related to what comes in, licensing with the government agencies related to the excise and customs and taxation. So here also there lies some opportunities. Um, in the human resources, of course, HRM and the industrial IR part, and the legal and licensing. So these are some of the some of the areas where we look at management trainees. I have intentionally not touched the manufacturing engineering or operations management or the IT function as such, or product engineering, because that is where primarily we look at hardcore engineers. But as I heard that about 40% of the aspiring grads are with the engineering background, so maybe there appears to be some opportunity on those fronts also. Um, so with that, I end my session over here. I am open for questions.
Thank you so much, sir. We already have a couple of questions in the chat box. And
Okay.
also, if students are interested, they can raise their hands through the Zoom feature and we'll let them ask the question directly. So, first up, sir, I'll read out the questions from the chat box if that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So, first question we have from Kurapati Balaji. Since auto sales continuously decreasing, how can a company like MG Motors grab the opportunity to increase the sales, and what will be the unique value proposition that is being offered to the consumer?
Um, I am actually surprised to hear that auto sales are continuously decreasing. If I exclude the month of September, if I consider say January to August time frame, I would agree with that statement. But if you look at the data in September, the Indian auto sales actually registered a growth over 2019. So, and as we speak, in the month of September and October, we are actually expecting very, very huge sales numbers because of the festival sales, and definitely it will be close to two digit increase over last year. I know last year was a year of recession, but then again, if you look at the benchmark of 2019 versus 2018, we might land up close to 2018 over here. However, I will still answer the question on how MG Motor is, can grab the opportunity to increase the sales. See, what we have done is we have been very cautious. Although we have a capacity to build close to 100,000 units, but that would call for having additional operations, having another crew, which means the cost per car goes up multifold. What we are doing is going conservatively. Based on our forecast, we are doing some extra workings and trying to position the vehicles for the marketing and sales team. Now, talking about the unique features, if I can say that we recently launched Hector Plus, which has been a huge success. Very recent recent launch related aligned with the festive season is the two-tone version of the Hector Plus. And last but not the least, we have launched Gloucester, which was launched in this month itself. So this Gloucester, actually, if I talk about the segment it covers it is competing against Toyota Fortuner and the Ford Endeavor. But if you look at the features perspective, that happens to be our USP. It is the only autonomous level 1 vehicle. Also, it has from the vehicle price perspective, it is much better priced as compared to its competitors. So the USP of MG Motor is like this, in that order. First is the feature, second is cost of ownership, and the third one is having the next generation technology. So it definitely relates with features, but when I say technology, technology is means something coming preponing something from the future. So these happens to be our USPs, and we confident that we will grab this opportunity. And the last point I want to say is that we have a very strong products lined up in future. You are going to hear a lot of launches, lot of products like Hector. We are going to have some some different or some unique offerings to the customer in the country. So I hope I answered your question. Want to add one more thing is that the cost of ownership. If we look at MG customer care in terms of the warranty and the kind of promise that we give once the customer buys the vehicle, it is unmatched with the competitors. It is something unique.
Okay, thank you, sir. Our next question is, what was MG's strategy to break into the cluttered Indian automobile industry? Also, how soon do you see EVs becoming prominent in India? This question has been asked by another PGDM student, Samrat Motilal.
I think a part of it I answered already. What was our strategy? Our strategy was actually to bring the cost of ownership is value for money to the customer, as I can say in simple words, and then feature loaded products. So that was our strategy, which I think was reasonably well accepted. With the aberration of some political developments on the border front, if they wouldn't have happened, probably we would already be running into shifts full time, but then that's fine. Second is also that if I talk about the EVs becoming prominent in India, I would say that we are still far away from EV becoming prominent. Primarily is the support infrastructure which EV requires. Example, if I am a EV car owner, I must have a very easily accessible charging points. If I have to travel from Vadodara to Delhi, I must make sure that I have EV chargers around, in about 100 kilometers or 50 kilometers apart. Wherever I stop over, I plug in the chargers. This is normally happens. I have seen in different countries where I visited, the abundance of EV charger is very significant. Now, talking about EV chargers is again different things. We have two kind of EV chargers. One is a DC EV chargers, which would take about 40 minutes to charge from 0 to 100%, which is the normal type. If I'm driving from here to Delhi, I will stop over for lunch. I will charge, put the vehicle on charging, and the moment once I am out after my lunch, the vehicle will be fully charged to go for another 400 kilometers. That is where the challenge is right now. So I think EV segment needs lot of infrastructural support from the government. That is one. Second challenge is on the commonality of the charging ports, because I have seen in China, I have seen in other countries, different companies have a different kind of charging ports. So even if government plans to put in infrastructure in throughout the country on the highways, unless and until the charging ports are not regulated and asked to these manufacturers to be having the same technology, having same kind of ports, till that time again we will be having the same situation. I think this is one lesson which India should learn from other countries, because this is the mistake I see very commonly happening in China, which we should do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. That indeed answered the question very well. The next question is by Romani Banerjee. What specific skill sets are must have for a fresh management graduate who has a non-tech background and wants to build a career in the auto sector?
If I say marketing means marketing, it doesn't really matter what. So since I am myself a management graduate, and my major was also marketing, so I clearly understand that it is basically the skills that you acquire from the college, from your business school, and the kind of projects that you do over there. The more you are aligned with the latest trend is what stands you apart. Most important is your attitude to learn the local or the specific requirements of different companies. As recruiters, we normally look at the person to have acquired the knowledge which was supposed to be he was or she was supposed to acquire through the academic institution, and how he is able to or she is able to represent it in terms of the professional performance perspective. We do not expect any prerequisites that yeah, a person should just walk in to my company and starts performing. There is a definitely for freshers we have a onboarding process, we have a training program. Based on that, we and the competencies, normally students are handed over the functions or the roles based on how they are adaptable to that. So I really do not think that is an issue. No specific skills, but just make sure what you have learned is what you adapted as a person, as an individual, and which you can convert to a performance, because what you learned eventually you need to perform at some point of time, and that is where you need to show it to your recruiters so that they find you to be a good resource which can get into the organization, fit into the organization. Talking about non-technical background to build a career in auto sector, it is a matter of getting into the company or getting into the automotive. As I say, marketing and the some of the functions as I talked about. If I say non-technical, definitely if somebody is with a commerce background, he or she can get into the supply chain management, and in fact all the options which I had flashed earlier, because I did not flash any technical verticals as such. So I think the field is open. The management graduate can get into anywhere, not only marketing, even if he or she is not from technical background.
Thank you, sir. I think this is a doubt that most of us have because a lot of us are from non-technical backgrounds. Next question is from Prateek Tomar. Sir, you did mention that to put a car from planning phase to road takes almost 5 years. There could be changes in the consumer's buying behavior in that time. How does MG cater to the last minute changes in the production and features?
Good question. Good question. But see, I will tell you, uh, feature is something which comes at a very later stage. It basically, when I say 4.5 years, is basically is more into the styling part and the drivability of the vehicle. Feature is something which is very the development cycle of any feature is not as long as these vehicles, because feature is not related to vehicle performance. I can develop feature. Okay, let me talk about it. Um, let's say Hector Plus was not planned. Okay, when we launched Hector, we over the months we got to know that yes, the customer expectation is to have a six-seater, but with the flexibility of having a boot space in case six people are not traveling. I think we were responsive enough to develop that feature into our car in about 8 months time, which I think is very, very good time. Very good. So right now with the technology on our hands, different kind of simulations happening on computer. It is becoming the life cycle is becoming very, very short. So as I said, the left side of vehicle development doesn't really worry about features. It worries about vehicle as a drivable vehicle, thing, and the technology part. Features development doesn't take that long time. So I think that is no issue as such. And another thing I want to say is that almost 5 years is something which is actually getting reduced. Now it is close to 4 years. Actually, we have improved almost 1 year. And this slide which I shared was of General Motors, my previous company. If I talk about MG Motors, Chinese guys, they are very, very efficient. Their product life cycle is about just over 3 years. But I still strongly feel that you need time to validate products. There are some things, if I have to run a vehicle for 100,000 kilometers to look at the behavior of different kind of failures, I cannot do those validations in 10,000 kilometers and say my vehicle is good. So some things which come with time will have to come with time. But yes, optimization is happening. It will continue to happen. The life cycle will continue to get shorter.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Nishi Chok. What is the new normal in auto manufacturing sector with respect to the ongoing pandemic?
New normal is actually just for the sake of it, I had taken it off. New normal is this, and social distancing we all follow. New normal is actually in automotive is like this. Uh, if I talk about people who are not related with manufacturing, they need not be in the plant. This is something which we learned. I coming from a manufacturing engineering function, I initially I thought that if I am during the lockdown period, what will I do? What will my team do? But then we started off from there. So we got to realize that it's not necessary to be in the environment all the time. You can manage remotely and more efficiently, more qualitatively, not many people to disturb you most of the times. So the new normal for non-manufacturing people is manage from a distance, focus on good communication, which is good. If I talk about the manufacturing, people have to come onto the floor. So maintaining social distancing on the workplace while coming and going out from the company during the lunch hours, and even on the weekends, we tell people like people try to unfollow the norms of social distancing, having a protective mask and all that, going out meeting people. So we tell people to restrict till the time we are out of this situation. The instructions is that once you are there with your family, please be there with your family, don't interact much. So I think yes, productivity has been impacted a little bit, but it is we are coming back. We started off with the 20% of our volume production when we started. We started back in May, around 25th or 26th of May. From then till now, we are close to our 100% production output. So I think we have got used to it, and no adverse impact as such on our performance operations.
Sir, the next question is by Raghav Rathi, and it says, "Is the in Indian context are self-driving cars a distant dream?"
Yes. If I look in the near future, it is definitely because before self-driven car, I will tell you about autonomous vehicles. We were doing a trial of Gloucester, and if you know, it's a front collision warning is one of the feature. Now, in Indian road, many people keep on crossing the road even while you are driving the vehicle. So imagine you are driving at a speed of 60 and suddenly somebody runs through the divider and crosses the road. The driver, the vehicle will automatically apply brakes. What will happen is the vehicle will stop, but the vehicle which is behind you will bang into you. So this is what I almost realized, and then we did some brainstorming. So answer to your question is that infrastructure has to develop, the mindset of people need to develop. In India, people need to start following the driving norms, and then only we will be migrating from autonomous level 1 to level 2 and 3. You are talking about fully autonomy, which is level 5, which I think I hope in next 10-15 years, even if it happens in India, will be a great thing to do. But then we need to have very strong government and their government policies to make people follow, because we Indians, when we go to other countries, we don't litter, we follow the rules, we do not break signals. Why? Because of the enforcement part, right? So we need to be self-disciplined, and the change has to begin with me. I need not wait for other people to change. So it is very important. So answer to your question is really very difficult, because it doesn't only involve infrastructure or the technology. It involves people and enforcement. So it all depends on how early we can align with that, then we are ready for autonomy.
Thank you, sir. The next question is by Rupesh Singh. What, according to you, the future of autonomous vehicles look like in India, owing to the infrastructure in our country and the job opportunities for the Indian masses?
See, job opportunity, if I talk about, as we said, new normal, working remotely, opportunities will be enough because it doesn't mean that if I want to work in autonomous vehicle technology, I need to be working for India. I can work for any other country while working from India, even going abroad for that later on. So I think opportunities on autonomy are huge. As I speak, from General Motors, my previous company, people were already working on autonomous vehicles for other countries from India. So opportunities to work are of course there. All the automotive companies, like if I talk about not MG Motor, but if I talk about uh, Volkswagen, if I talk about Mercedes, if I talk about Mahindra, Tata Motors, all these companies, they have their technical centers in the country, most of them in Bangalore or in Chennai. So these are the target locations or the areas where people can look at working in autonomous vehicle technology. As far as India is concerned, again, I answered that in near future it is very difficult to have autonomous vehicles flying on our road. We need to have a paradigm shift as a country as a whole. Till that time, I think there are many other milestones which we need to capture before we reach there.
Sir, our next question is by Akshit Gupta. The huge issue for most of the industries, including auto industry, is going to be harder to generate the demand because most of the consumers may not be in the right frame of mind and are not going to buy things like a car. How can a company like MG Motors grab the opportunity and work on the demand?
Uh, See, I think uh, with pandemic, uh, definitely the job opportunities have gone down. People have been hesitant. The consumers' behaviors have been very much conservative in commodities. Definitely, automotive vehicles being which coming with a large, with a huge investment, it happens to be a challenge. And people are have been, there's a lot of recession. I see around me a lot of people losing their jobs for that matter because of the industry shrinking. But I think the turnaround has already happened, and the passenger sales are back on track. And if I talk about MG Motor, there are lucrative finance schemes which would definitely have, customer paying some minimum amount and then without any interest owning the vehicle for a long period of time, maybe a deferred payments. Those kind of finance initiatives are always there from ease of buying perspective. I think that there is impact. People are thinking twice before buying cars. But when I look at the vehicle sales of last 2 months, I am forced to think that probably this question is not relevant because people are willing to buy. One important reason why people are opting for buying vehicle is because of avoiding shared driving. People who used to go together to offices, maybe 2 or 3 people, or people who used to take cabs or metros or trains, now they think that if they go on their own vehicle, they will be safer. So I think rather this has been an upside of it also rather than a downside. With the pandemic, people are opting for their self driving options as well. So it's an opportunity.
Thank you, sir. So we have a lot of questions coming in. I will just pick a few questions, keeping in mind the time frame as well. So the next question is by Raghav Rathi, and it is, what are the few key areas where change in the policy by government can boost the demand and create a positive sentiment among the automobile manufacturers?
First of all, it is the taxes linked with that. The excise actually plays a significant impact onto the value of the vehicle which goes to the customer. So the government can work on to the GST part of it, as well as the government, as you know, that government has a subsidy for sub 4 meter vehicles. you pay lesser tax if the vehicle length is shorter. And so the government needs to be proactive in terms of their policies, which reduces the cost of vehicle to the customer. As well as, if I talk about manufacturer, the GST that we also pay to the government for the goods that we buy from the country. Or because, see, if I talk about the customs duty, I pay huge customs duty for the import content. So if these are taken care, then we can significantly reduce the cost of manufacturing, and which can be passed on to the customer as such. So that is one area the government policies, they can help positively in demanding, in boosting the demand.
Thank you, sir. So we have a lot of more questions on the demand side of the scenario only. So the next question is by Gautam, and it says, according to the recent news articles, the demand is set to be unsustainable, and the recent demand is regarded as the pent-up demand. So keeping that in mind, what is the action plan for this type of commotions in the future, taking into account the recent announcement of Tesla entering India?
As I said, Tesla is an electric vehicle, so I really, it may be there, but it may penetrate it may have maybe less than 0.5% of market share, as such. Because for every vehicle, for EV, there has to be an infrastructure which is not there. Second, as you said, that it is a spike right now uh, in the auto industry, which is going to go down as we enter into the next quarter. But when we say this, we ignore the fact that we are at a pretty good condition as far as the solution to the COVID-19 is concerned. We are looking forward to vaccines getting there in the market as early as December. So once we have it, so it is a matter of say a couple of months. Once we have a solution, then the sentiments would definitely change, and I think the market would definitely bounce back to pre 2019 stage. So I am very optimistic about because we have been monitoring the sentiments of people right from I would say March, month on month basis, where even we had zero sales for a couple of months. But then we have been monitoring all this. I do not agree that this demand would go down. Yes, the spikes and troughs are always there. The year end, definitely, because of the model year change, the volumes are less. That's the reason you would find all car companies announcing discounts in the month of December to clear their nameplates which were built in the previous year. So with that aberration, I do not see any concerns. The market is definitely going to bounce back from first quarter next year, not to turn back, I think. So you can mark my word, and we can look forward to it.
Okay, sir. So we'll take up the last question for today, which is by Bhumika Arora. Investors have pulled back from sectors too dependent on China given the shaky geopolitical scenario, and EV makers seem poised to be on the losing end. So, what extent do you think these supply chain disruptions can deviate from the national auto policy of India and its aims in 2025?
Okay. Yes, China dependency on China is huge. If I talk about Bajaj Auto, if I talk about Maruti Suzuki, Mahindras or Tatas, even these companies cannot work if the goods do not come from China. Now, why the dependency on China is there? We must understand. It is basically because of the cost of buying. See, we have done a lot of studies, and our MD, Mr. Chaba, openly talks about, even though we work in a British company which is owned by a Chinese automaker. It's a bare fact. However, if you look at, we are open to develop local supplier base. In fact, we have given we have offered support to MSMEs in case they want to come forward and develop some part which are manufactured in China. So I think yes, the paradigm shift will happen from China to India, but then the costs would go up. I think I missed the question in between. Can I? Who's the person? Let me read out the question once again. What's the name of the
So it has been asked by Bhumika Arora.
Bhumika? Okay, investors have pulled back from sectors too dependent on China, given the shaky geopolitical scenario in India. Okay. I think EV makers. I'm failing to understand how EV. Yes, I know EV makers. If we talk about the battery packs, they are coming from China mostly, and that is the largest source of battery supplies. Other than that, I think from EV product technology, I do not see large dependence on China as such. And definitely with the situation right now, there is a lot of aggressive investments getting diverted from in India by Indian investors as well as foreign investors looking at India as a market, India, Vietnam, China. So China may be replaced by maybe Vietnam or Taiwan or any other country or maybe India. But I think investors pulling out from sectors too dependent on China, I don't think no major issue, no major impact on that. And when we say national auto policy of India and its aim in 2025, I think the policy can always be looked at because we are in a transition phase. How the policy will take turn going forward, we really do not know. Because what matters most is that the industry has to be in the top gear, whatever is the driving forces behind it. So we do not know what is going to come in future. No big deal over there, I guess.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. If time permits, can we take another question?
Yeah.
Okay. So this question is by Jesse, and he wants to personally ask this question. So Jesse, if you may.
Okay.
So I think he's written the question in the.
Okay. It was great hearing from you with a blend of both manufacturing and management area. Sir, my question is that in the recent times, we have started using the plastic components to a greater extent, and critical parts are being replaced by reinforced glass full material. So, and 3D printing can help us to reduce the time frame of bringing a car to road from the design phase. But the challenge is that 3D printing is not feasible for mass production.
3D printing.
So, when can we expect the use of 3D printing in a full swing for mass production in the manufacturing area?
Okay. See, 3D printing is a technology which gives you upfront and very accurate component, no doubts about it. But there are limitations in terms of the processing of the component, in terms of the thermal, in terms of the structural strength and different criterias with which the different components are linked with. So I think, yes, 3D printing is very efficient, it is very cost effective. However, the applicability of 3D printing right now is very limited to some specific components which are not too critical. But yes, critical to dimensions, definitely yes, but critical to performance, definitely there is a question mark. But as we all understand that the technology does evolve, there is a lot of headways in the 3D printing technology. uh, Another thing is that the mass production ability of 3D printing, the economics of the component cost coming out of a 3D printer, because 3D printer definitely takes its own time in printing the component, right, from a 3D image. So there has to be some revolutionary improvements in this technology before we actually start using it as a regular components into our products, because everything depends on time and cost. So this is where we have to look at what suits best.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. This was the last question that we could take up for this session. And I have to say, this was a very, very comprehensive and an engaging session. Very informative, and really we could delve into what the automotive industry has to offer. And now I would like to ask Vishal to give the word of thanks.
Thank you, Mishita. So, sir, I would like to session. It was really insightful and valuable for all of us, and it was good to know that MG Motors is now near to 100% production and sales is back on track. So, like you said, it can be the other way around, since a lot of people now prefer to travel through their personal vehicles. That is also a thing that added it to up. These are tough times, and many of us are curious about what will happen in the near future. So, I believe the insights that you have provided us and the advice you have given, that will definitely go a long way. So we really love the way you could highlight the positives even in such a dire situation. And as we, the fresh graduates of MBA, we felt really motivated to keep pushing and adopting the new normal. Like you said, there's not actually a particular skill required, but what we learn, we should be able to adopt and present it. And that will help us succeed in our career. So I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation and gratitude to you, sir, and for taking out time from your busy schedule and engaging with all of us in this great session. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the conversations, the kind of questions that I got. Really very insightful and very comprehensive. Really good questions that I could have from the audience. That gives me a sense of feeling that whatever knowledge I intended to impart, that was delivered. So thanks a lot, everybody, and nice connecting with you. Thanks to BIMTech, management and the students. Appreciate.
Thank you, sir.
Grateful to you, sir, for your valuable
you,
time
sir.
and insights.
My pleasure. Okay.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.